If you went and walked onto my set, it would have looked like it was lit like a sitcom.
So that's what makes the show look so dark and clean.
If I had put a backlight on him here, it totally would have ruined the scariness of it, the mood of it. The idea that something horrible could happen, even in a place that just feels like at your house or my house.
Yo, what is going on, guys? My name is Ted, and welcome to Indy Mogul. Now, today we're going to be sitting down with cinematographer Alex Disenhof, who, if you don't know him, is one of the DPs behind shows such as Legion and Watchmen, and he's also the cinematographer behind a show called The Exorcist, which, yes, based on the famous movie, and if you haven't seen it already, it's probably one of the best-looking horror shows on TV. We're going to be talking about the show not only from the camera, the lighting, the lenses, but we're also going to be talking about how to break a lot of common horror tropes when you're shooting cinematography, and how to actually make the dark shots of your frame look just that much better. Let's do this.
There is something inside my house. It's a demon.
A demon?
And it's trying to take my daughter.
So this was back in 2016, so it was right at the beginning of kind of this new golden age of television. The showrunner of this show, this guy Roland Jones, he was not really interested in making a show that looked like a Fox show.
That looked like traditional kind of happy, bright television.
Totally,
Yeah.
but I did look a lot at like German Expressionism. I wanted the blacks of the show to be very black. So I actually developed a LUT, for instance, that I basically had to overlight it to make it look correct on the monitor. But what it did was it essentially allowed the blacks to be really, truly crisp because I was giving the sensor a lot of light. So yeah, I mean, all of those things went into making a show that was much more, I think, cinematic than anything that Fox had really allowed themselves to do at that time. If you went and walked onto my set, it would have looked like it was lit like a sitcom. But on the monitor, it didn't.
So that's what makes the show look so dark and clean.
The way I shot this show is like I could add a pretty substantial amount of eye light. I could still keep really deep blacks. Like there's so many ways to expose a center or a negative. There's no one right way. It's just this is how I wanted to do it for the show because I really wanted like very printy, deep blacks out of a digital camera.
What kind of camera did you guys choose and lenses, and why did you choose the package?
We did the Ariel X's. We shot with Zeiss Super Speeds, actually. That was a big thing for Fox. They gave me a little bit of a hard time. They're like, why are you shooting on prime lenses? You know, isn't that slower? And I said, well, yeah, but they were the look I was after. First of all, it gives you a lot of flexibility because they're very light. They open up, really wide. We use coated super speeds, so they don't necessarily have a veiling flare, which I tend to be a bit allergic to. So what I was looking for was a set of lenses that would give texture to the image. They aren't perfectly rectilinear, they're not perfectly clean. They have a little softness to them. The wider you go, the softer they get. They just felt like the perfect kind of mix of modern and classic that we were looking for. And they were relatively easy to use.
Yeah, makes sense. You ready to jump into some scenes? You ready to do this?
Let's do it.
Alex, tell us what's going on in this scene.
Yeah, so this is Father Marcus, who becomes one of the main characters in the show. He's in Mexico City, and he's going to see a boy who is possessed. This was a sequence we knew we wanted it to be very bold. It's the start of a show. Rupert, the director, really wanted him to come out of pitch black, and so that kind of inspired me for the rest of it. We found this amazing location that has all these layers and levels, and I really wanted to play with hard light and shadow, and like here you see that's very kind of German expressionist with a shadow on the wall.
This is those blacks you're talking about, those like super dark blacks.
Yes, yeah, and this is three lights. The light that's lighting the ramp right there is actually a real street light. So it wasn't that bright because I wanted to rely on a street light to just give a little bit of texture on that ramp. I mean, it's not at key, it's still underexposed. I was probably pretty wide open on the lens here. And then I gave a little bit of extra light scraping the wall, on the second story. Further down, the light that's actually silhouetting him, there was a light there. When we were on the scout, I noticed it was like silhouetting us as we went past. And so that kind of gave me the idea. I made sure that we wet down everything so you get some glints and glares. If you ever see it wet down, it's usually because we wet it down. So I didn't want that part of the frame to kind of just disappear. I mean, but again, it's very simple. You find the location, you get the idea of what it could offer you, and then it wasn't big lighting balloons, it wasn't anything like that.
What was the recipe of moonlight that you guys were working with on this, and how did you guys light these nighttime scenes?
For this scene, I wasn't really considering any of it to be kind of moonlight, more of an urban ambience. I oftentimes shoot my night exteriors at 4300. Basically get a little bit warmer tungsten, and you get a little cool daylight. So like, you don't have to gel everything. You can put a tungsten lamp on. You already basically have a half CTO. You want a blue moonlight, but you don't want it full blue. If you put your camera kind of right in the middle of the range, you get this nice color separation. So that's what I did here.
I'm speaking now to the presence inside, Casey Rance.
Classic horror scene here. We got our cathedral and our ghost possession scene.
This scene was really about the two priests starting to interrogate Casey, who is possessed by the devil, and trying to goad it out of her. I remember this scene actually being particularly difficult to shoot because there's a progression that goes through it. It starts off pretty normal, and then obviously things start to fall apart, literally. Lights start to flicker, candles go out, the atmosphere changes, and then there's a full lighting change when the demon comes out. For these kinds of scenes, I would light out the windows a little bit. We had all sorts of custom panels made, down to little tiny things that we could just tape in a corner. For a scene like this, even though there's not a ton of movement, there was enough where I knew I couldn't put a ton of lights on the floor because the actors needed to go, especially this character here. He needed to move around the room. For his rim light here, I think it was probably just LEDs taped up to ceilings or like on a menace arm. A smaller, it might have been a book light. And that's probably what's creating the shape on his face. And then I think a lot of the fill is probably a light mat and some panels. I oftentimes will ring a set with small lights because if the actor wants to change their action, it doesn't take that long to put them up, right? When you're first setting up the scene. Probably would have done at least 2 small LEDs kind of taped up into the corners on every corner and maybe even in the ceiling. Just so I would always have that ability to turn one off or turn one on really quickly. Every one of our sets in this show, everything was wired back to the DMX board. So this guy could control everything. We rehearsed the scene with the actors. We essentially set cues. So the actors hit a certain line and he has his own monitor. He can say, okay, great, presses a button. Now they start flickering.
And then when she's actually possessed here,
she got onto set and she had those black contacts. They create such like a beady look, and a larger source would have had a bigger reflection in there. I think what I ended up using was quite a small like LED or something that was basically just pointed at her. It gave that kind of weird glow in her eye. Not a glow, but the kind of pins in her eyes and the little shine on her forehead that made her look really unhealthy. So we did some weird things like that on the show, and we weren't afraid to kind of push it a little bit. So
I love it. Now, before we move on, I just want to give a quick shout out to Squarespace, who will absolutely be there for when you want to update your image. Now, I know it's a little bit hard to go out there and shoot and work, especially during these times, so you might as well just use this as an opportunity to reflect on your past work and showcase what you got. Now, if you don't want to make a new reel and you have all your films somewhere on Vimeo, somewhere, this is what I would do. Make a new page with an images layout. Screenshot a bunch of those thumbnails for each of your films, upload them to the image box, and then change the click-through link for each of the corresponding links with the corresponding film. And before you know it, you have a film showcase that's actually going to put you ahead of the race when it's time to start working again. All that's left to do after that is just choose from over 200 top-level domains. It is super duper easy, and it's kind of actually fun too. So head on over to squarespace.com to start your 14-day free trial. And if you type in the link squarespace.com/IndyMogul, you're also going to receive 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. So we'll put that in the link in the description down below. But thank you again to Squarespace. And now back to the episode.
I never saw her again.
So this scene is kind of a big reveal towards the end of the season. You realize who Gina Davis's character really is. It's a bit of a broader subject, but there's a lot of political stuff happening, that people don't really talk about on film sets. And, someone like Gina is, she's 60-ish. It was a challenge because I wanted to make her look good, but at the same time, you're shooting a horror show. So that became a consistent kind of challenge, is how do I light her in a way that is soft, fills in, any kind of wrinkles, but still keep drama, still keep the horror. First time I'd ever worked with an actor who kind of had a certain request, I guess.
She kind of has this super soft quality of light, but there's none of that spilling anywhere else on the set.
It was Careful blocking, oftentimes of like keeping her away from walls. You know, the grips were heroes on this show. We built all sorts of stuff. Pulley systems for double nets, single nets, solid, so I could control the contrast. I'm sure I have light on both sides of the camera and underneath her at different levels. It's not an easy thing. It's getting easier with the tools we have now. But, it's always a challenge, yeah.
Okay, the behemoth shot.
Yeah, it was really nerve-wracking, man, because it's like one of the shots from The Exorcist, and we didn't want to make it exact because it's not the exact same space, but we wanted to, like, be so obviously honoring it, it connects to the movie. I did a lot of research for this shot about how they did it back then. First of all, I learned that the original Exorcist was shot in like 250 days or something crazy. So for this particular scene in that movie, they pre-lit it, I believe, for 2 or 3 nights.
And that would never fly on a network TV show.
I had 3 hours, like total for this whole scene. So it was like, like, like what am I supposed to do? But the one benefit we do have nowadays that they didn't have is some visual effects help. Everything you're seeing there is completely practical. That light is practical, the smoke is practical, the lamppost we put in, that's practical. What you don't see in this shot, because the visual effects people took it out, is the light in the window that's creating light. And this was a collaboration between myself and the visual effects department. In the movie was like a series of mirrors and crazy stuff that our space inside this real house didn't have. We decided the best way to do it would actually just be, let's shoot a plate without it in the window. Then let's put a light in the window that's not flaring a lens. It's pointing to exactly that beam of light that you see is a real light. Essentially, they just painted it out later. It was a really easy paint out for the most part. There's some smoke manipulation to paint it out, but that's pretty much it.
What? Okay, I was thinking that the light was like from the side or something. I guess that doesn't make sense because it's backlight.
The light is sitting right in there. I think I just had maybe a 12 by with some sky panels bouncing into it to give a little bit of texture, like scrapey texture on the house. I had something in the back alley shooting back out to give a silhouette of that tree and to give some vanishing point, down the side of the building. The lamp is something that I asked the art department to put in because that was an homage to the original. So I had some lamps on inside the house and then that one light that's creating it. And my first instinct was to put her in the light, and I looked at the image again. I was like, oh, this isn't right. What are we doing wrong? And I was like, oh no, she has to be silhouetted by the smoke. She has to be behind the light. So that light is not hitting her, it's hitting in front of her. And that's what's creating the silhouette. Talking about light, I'm losing light fast in here.
No, totally. For people out there that are looking to try to shoot more horror work, do you have any advice that you could impart for people that are trying to nail that look?
Don't be afraid of the dark. Use it as a storytelling technique. Another quick kind of technical thing is if you put something that's bright in frame, it'll make the dark things look darker. If you have everything dark in your frame, it's going to look like mud. You have a bright point of light in your shot, your irises will close down and literally make the dark parts of your frame darker. If you really want to use your blacks effectively, make sure you have something that is the opposite.
Alrighty guys, there you have it. There's your episode with Alex Disenhof on the cinematography of The Exorcist. If you want to keep up with Alex and actually see the new work that he's working on, we'll put that link in the description down below. Likewise, if you want to see more or hear more about Alex's story, we've also got a podcast that we'll leave for the description down below as well. Again, thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this episode. Start putting your work out there by going to squarespace.com/IndyMogul for 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. But Indy Mogul, that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching. And of course, we'll catch you guys next time. The idea of lighting haze so that it creates a white background to silhouette someone up against, because the haze itself can create a new background.
Exactly.
That someone can be silhouetted against.
We're having like a major thunderstorm here. It just started. Yeah. Sorry, I'm sure. Sorry about the audio if it's
Because I want it to make